The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the vast Marian army assembled at the banks of the Daya River. Tens of thousands of soldiers stood in disciplined formations, their polished spears glinting like fireflies in the dimming light. War elephants, adorned in golden armor, shifted restlessly, their deep rumbles merging with the distant thunder of war drums. To the center of it all, Emperor Ashoka sat astride his great war elephant, clad in gleaming armor, his sharp eyes fixed on the distant walls of Kalinga, the last unconquered kingdom in his vast empire. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of the river, but beneath it lurked the stench of impending bloodshed. Kalinga refuses to bow, General Virasena said, standing beside him. They will fight to the last man. Ashoka's lips curled into a faint smirk. He relished resistance. It made conquest all the more satisfying. His father, Emperor Bindusara, had expanded the Mauryan Empire, but Ashoka would be the one to immortalize it. He had spent years crushing rebellions, executing rivals, and ensuring his dominance. Now, Kalinga stood as the final obstacle in his path. Then we shall grant them their wish, Ashoka said, his voice as cold as steel. He raised his sword high. The war drums roared. The battle had begun. The siege of Kalinga, the Mauryan forces descended like a storm upon the battlefield. Arrows darkened the sky, spears clashed, and the ground trembled under the weight of charging war elephants. Ashoka, ever the warrior, fought at the front lines, his sword cutting through enemies with ruthless precision. Cries of the dying filled the air. The riverbanks ran red. Kalinga's warriors fought fiercely, their loyalty unwavering, but they were no match for Ashoka's relentless military machine. Hours passed. By dusk, Kalinga was no more. Fires raged through the city. Corpses lay in heaps, the once thriving kingdom reduced to ashes. The few survivors, mostly women and children, huddled among the ruins, their faces twisted with grief and terror. Ashoka dismounted his elephant, surveying the destruction. The sight was one he had seen countless times before. Victory. And yet, something felt different. A small movement caught his eye. Amidst the wreckage, a child, no older than 6, clutched the lifeless body of his mother. His tiny hand shook as he stared up at the emperor, not with fear, but with hollow, unblinking sorrow. Ashoka felt something stir in his chest, a feeling foreign to him. For the first time in his life, the weight of conquest pressed upon his soul, but he turned away. "We march at dawn," he commanded, stepping over the bodies. The wind carried the faint cries of the orphaned child, trailing behind him like a ghost. Night fell over Kalinga, but Ashoka found no rest. He sat alone in his grand war tent, the golden embroidery of his canopy swaying with the wind. A silver lamp flickered beside him, casting long shadows across the silk-draped walls. The celebration outside, his generals drinking and boasting of their victory, felt distant. Hollowed, he reached for his wine but stopped. The battlefield clung to his mind like a curse. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw them. The corpses stacked like fallen leaves. The wailing mothers. The orphan child clutching his dead mother. Their cries were not drowned by the clang of swords anymore. They screamed within his soul. Ashoka, the ruthless conqueror who had once bathed in the glory of war, now sat in silence, his hands trembling. Why did this battle feel different? The walk through hell at dawn, he donned a simple robe and, without his royal guards, walked through the ruins of Kalinga. The air was thick with the stench of death. Crows feasted on bodies left unclaimed. The wounded moaned, their voices hoarse with suffering. He paused before an elderly woman cradling the lifeless body of her son. Her thin fingers stroked his blood-stained face, rocking him as if he were still a child. She looked up at Ashoka, not with fear, nor with hatred, but with a sorrow that shattered him. "Are you happy now, Emperor?" she whispered. Something inside him cracked. He staggered back, his vision blurring. Her words struck deeper than any blade ever had. His entire life had been built upon conquest, dominance, and bloodshed. And for what? Had he truly won, or had he lost his own soul? The monk's wisdom that evening Desperate for clarity, he sent for Upagupta, a revered Buddhist monk known for his wisdom. When the monk arrived, he found Ashoka pacing in his chamber, his hands clenched, his mind restless. "I have conquered the world," Ashoka said, his voice hollow. "Yet I have never felt emptier." Upagupta studied him for a long moment before speaking. "What weighs heavier on your heart, Emperor? The kingdoms you have taken, or the lives you have destroyed?" Ashoka's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to him this way. "Tell me, great conqueror," the monk continued, stepping closer. "If you stand atop a mountain of skulls, can you truly call it victory?" The words hit like thunder. Ashoka sank to his knees, his entire body trembling. He had believed himself invincible, but now, faced with the truth of his actions, he felt small. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The monk smiled. "Abandonva. Choose Dharma over blood. The greatest victory, Ashoka, is not over kingdoms, but over oneself." And in that moment, Ashoka knew. His path had changed forever. The empire trembled as Ashoka abandoned war. His ministers were shocked. His generals resisted. His advisors warned of rebellion. The Mauryan Empire was built on conquest, they argued. If we do not strike first, our enemies will. But Ashoka stood firm. "The bloodshed ends now," he dismissed war councils, dismantled siege engines, and ordered the stamping of new edicts, not of dominance, but of compassion, tolerance, and peace. "No more shall my sword carve sorrow into this land," he declared. "From this day forward, we shall conquer only through righteousness." A new empire, a new Ashoka. His first decree was a shock to the empire. He outlawed violence against prisoners and civilians. Instead of executing dissenters, he listened to them. Instead of ruling by fear, he ruled by dharma. Temples and hospitals rose where barracks once stood. Roads were built, not for armies, but for pilgrims and scholars. But his greatest change was within himself. One day, as Ashoka rode through a village, he saw a young boy playing near a monastery. That it was him, the orphan from Kalinga, and no longer trembling in grief, no longer a child of war, but a child of peace. Ashoka stopped. The boy looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, Ashoka knelt before him. "Have you found peace, child?" Ashoka asked. The boy studied him, his gaze no longer hollow, but full of something Ashoka had never seen before. "Have you, Emperor?" Ashoka smiled. For the first time in his life, he finally had. And so began the golden age of the Mauryan Empire.
A week later, I found the truth, not in a dramatic confrontation, not in a slip of the tongue, but in the cold clarity of a voice memo that I had installed a basic audio recorder in his car. It wasn't something I ever imagined myself doing. But desperation has a strange way of making you resourceful. I told myself it was for closure, not revenge. I needed to hear it. To know, and I did. Late one night, in the dim hush of our bedroom, I listened to the muffled sound of the engine, the rustle of a bag, then laughter. Her laughter, light, breathy, unmistakably intimate, then his voice. "You always know how to make me forget everything. God, I wish I could just be with you full time." A pause. "She's not like you. We haven't connected in years. I'm just staying for the kid." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the silence after his words ring louder than the betrayal itself. So, it was real. Not a child's mistake. Not paranoia. He had someone else, emotionally, physically. And worse than the affair was the way he had rewritten our story in his mind. I was no longer his partner, but an obligation. A placeholder. The next day, I waited until our son was at a playdate and asked my husband to meet me at home. He walked in smiling, a coffee in hand, and froze when he saw my face. "We need to talk," I said simply. That he tried the usual dance. "Is something wrong? You're being distant. Did I forget something?" But when I played the recording, the color drained from his face. That he didn't deny it. He just sat down, placed the coffee on the table, and exhaled like a man caught in a lie he had rehearsed escaping for months. "It's not what you think," he began. "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. I didn't plan this. I waited." She listens to me. She makes me feel alive. I've been so lost, and I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. Each word landed like a slow bruise. I had braced for anger, but what I felt was something quieter. A hollowing. A confirmation that the man I once adored had already left me in spirit, long before he confessed. "Then why didn't you leave?" I asked. "Because of our son. Because I didn't want to destroy this." But he already had that. I said nothing more. I left him sitting in that silence, surrounded by the life he pretended to be protecting. I walked down to the shore that evening alone, the same beach where our son had spoken the truth I hadn't been ready to hear, and as the tide rolled in, I understood. Some truths don't arrive with thunder, they drift in quietly, with a child's voice and a whisper of waves. 3 weeks later, I stood on the same stretch of beach, barefoot, wind in my hair, my son's laughter echoing ahead of me like music. The same sun hung in the sky, the same waves curled against the shore, but everything felt different. Lighter. Sharper. Real. My husband had moved into a furnished apartment across town. We told our son that Daddy needed some space for work and that we'd both still be there for him. He accepted it with the resilience only children possess, more curious about when he could visit the building's pool than why our family no longer fit under one roof. That I hadn't told him the full story. I wasn't ready. Someday, I would. When he was old enough to understand love, and how sometimes it collapses under the weight of silence and secrets. That I end the days since that confrontation, I hadn't begged, pleaded, or bargained. I didn't burn his clothes or cry in public. I simply stopped. I stopped pretending, stopped hoping he'd come back to who he once was. That man, the one who left notes on my pillow, who called just to hear my voice, was gone long before the red-haired woman appeared. Grief didn't come in sobs. It came in waves, quiet, rhythmic, numbing. I let it wash over me, but I didn't let it drown me. That I enrolled in a support group. I started therapy. I wrote letters I never sent. And slowly, I began to rebuild, piece by piece, not the life we had, but the life I wanted. "Mommy, look," my son shouted, holding up a new shell. He came running back, cheeks flushed. "It's even bigger than the other one." I crouched beside him, brushing sand from his fingers. "It's beautiful," I said, and I meant it. That we built a castle together, side by side. No phones. No noise. Just us. Every shovel of sand felt like defiance, against heartbreak, against resentment, against the temptation to become bitter. That I glanced down the beach where couples walked, hands intertwined. I didn't envy them. Not today. Today, I felt whole in a way I hadn't in years. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows behind us, I held my son close and whispered, "You're the bravest boy I know." He looked up, puzzled. "Why?" "Because you told the truth, even when it was hard. And because you reminded me what matters most." He grinned and wrapped his arms around my waist. The tide began to rise, touching the edge of our sandcastle. I didn't mind. Not everything is meant to last. But some things, like love, real love, remain, even after the structures fall. That I stood tall as the wind picked up, carrying salt and freedom in equal measure. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel abandoned. That I felt free.